What is up, Travel and Adventure Show? Hey, my name is David McKay, and I am going to be bringing you some wonderful photography tips throughout the next hour, talking about Asia, specifically talking about Mongolia and working with the Eagle Hunters there, working with Ashilpan, the Eagle Huntress, and getting to know her family, and just overall giving you a bunch of cool photography tips in general. Now, if you have not yet been to any of the other travel shows that have taken place so far, you might want to try and check out some of the programming from that. We have done a number of photography speaking events for the travel shows, and we have covered a lot of material. So hopefully, if you haven't seen that, they'll be getting that and putting that out soon as well, because it's not only just about Asia, it's about going all over the world. And the first travel show that we did, we showed and talked about all kinds of photography tips. And then the second one was on the American West, and we talked about all these locations all over the American West that we love to photograph. And during all of that, we've given tons of photography help and tutorials. So make sure you check those out. We are also going to be speaking at the Africa Travel and Adventure Show coming up in January. I hope you catch that as well. We will be doing a whole new presentation for that too, and that will be based on photographing out on a wildlife safari. All right, I want to go ahead and get started here on Mongolia and talking about our good friend here. This is Ashilpan. You may know her as the Eagle Huntress. The Eagle Huntress, if you have not seen this documentary, it is a must-see documentary, and you will, like us, as soon as you see it, go, I have to go to Mongolia. And the answer is yes, you have to go to Mongolia. If you are looking for an adventure, you are looking for something different and unique, now is the time to get to Mongolia. It was rated as one of the top 10 places to travel. Of course, then we hit this COVID pandemic and everything has been at a standstill, but we fully expect that to recover, and we're going to be seeing Mongolia going off the charts. And the thing about it is, a lot of people can go to Mongolia, and a lot of people do, and they go and they basically fly into the main city of Ulaanbaatar, and then they do some things around the city, maybe do something called Nadam Festival, which I'm going to be talking about here in a bit, and then they might go out for a night or two and stay in a gur camp. You might know those gurs as something called a yurt. Now, the thing about that is awesome, but those are what we call tourist camps. We want you to get out into the far outreaches of Mongolia to where the actual culture is just so amazing with people like the hunters, the Eagle Hunters. All right, I just wanted to get back to our time with Ashilpan again, the Eagle Huntress, and a few things of note about that. You know, one of the things that you want to do on any tour, let alone a photography tour, is you want to make sure that you're not just going with, some big group that is 50 people going everywhere and seeing everything in a day. See 2 minutes here, 2 minutes there, and you've seen it all. And you guys know what I'm talking about if you've been on that type of tour. And I'm hesitant. I know that there's a lot of tour operators that's how they work, but I really love, small and intimate travel. And more than that, I love it when you can work with people that know people. What I mean by that is they get to know the locals, they have relationships with the locals, and it allows you as a client of a tour operator to be able to do things that really nobody else gets the opportunity to do. We have a guide. His name is Oso, O-S-O, and you can always email me, whether you go with us to Mongolia or not. You can always email me. I'm happy to refer him. He is the guy, and he is awesome, and he has gotten us opportunities, and this was one of those opportunities. Here we have Ashapon, and what is so special about this is the relationships with the hunters and their eagles is extremely special, and I will share coming up here soon about that a little more. But one of the things is that when the eagles eat or drink, mostly like in this situation going down to the river to drink, that is something only the hunter and their family really ever witness, and it's not part of anything else. It's kind of a sacred thing. And here Ashapon has never been photographed with her eagle drinking. It's not even in the film, and she allowed us to do this. Now the caveat was she said that we could use this and do things like this and educate, but she didn't want us to use this image or sell this image or put it on Facebook, things like that. So anyway, you guys are getting a little glimpse into something really special, and that was just something that we got to do that I wanted to share with you folks how amazing that was. All right, before we get going with more of Mongolia and some tips and tricks on how we photographed and talking about some of those images and gear and all that good stuff, I want to remind you that we have, as I mentioned before, I've already spoken at a couple of these travel shows, and we did a lot of tutorials, a lot of tips and tricks, everything from finding focus and exposure to lenses to how to hold your camera right to tripods, and the list goes on and on and on. And rather than repeat all that, we want to keep giving you fresh content. So just a reminder that we have talked about all of those things already at a couple of the other travel shows, and if you did not catch that, I believe that the Travel and Adventure Show, you're going to be able to go to their website, travelshows.com, and they are going to have that as part of their new Travel Shows 365, as well as their Travel Shows TV that I believe is coming. So if you haven't seen us speak on all of those wonderful photography tutorials, tips, and tricks, that is coming. Now, in the meantime, one thing that I did want to do, and if you've seen this from the other travel shows, go ahead and fast forward through the next 11, 12 minutes here, and that is I am going to have Toby Gelston. Toby, who works with us, travels with us all over the world. He's also a famous YouTube personality. He's got over 320,000 subscribers on his photography YouTube channel, which is photorec.tv. He has done a video for us on explaining exposure, and no matter what tutorials we do, it always still comes down to light and exposure. And so go ahead and take a look at this video about learning exposure, and this is something that you want to take notes on, and this will help you no matter what you're doing in photography, no matter where you're at in the world, and this is a key to getting great photographs. So go ahead and take a look at this right now, and then we'll be back with more tips and tricks here and talking about some more images from Mongolia, as well as the beautiful culture in Mongolia.
And that's what a correct exposure is. A picture that you've taken that looks the way you want. So it doesn't necessarily have to look the same as what your eyes are seeing for it to be correct to you. But in this case, we are going to use that as an example. Based on what my eyes are seeing, I'm going to set an exposure of a scene and just kind of walk you through the options you have to change to create a correct exposure and things to watch out for as you do that. So let's just, real quick, I'm in Scene Intelligent Auto. I'm on the green A. We're just going to stay here for just a second. I'm going to press the Live View button. And here is the scene we're looking at. We have some flowers, and for those of you who have watched my other videos, you know right now I'm sitting under this big skylight. It's an overcast day, so I have nice diffuse light coming in. This jar of flowers is at the edge of that skylight, and beyond that it starts to get pretty shadowy fairly quickly. You can see there's a ruler and there's something white back there. We're going to be able to see those things in a moment. But here's what the camera judges to be a correct exposure of this image, and it's pretty close. But, you know, the camera doesn't always decide what's best. And in this case, to talk about all of our options that we have to change, I want to switch to manual. And so that's what I'm going to do now. I'm going to rotate the dial to M. And you should follow along. Feel free to follow along. I think this is going to be worth a lot more worth your time if you have your camera in hand. And it doesn't matter if you have a Canon T4i or a Nikon. The general settings that we are talking about are identical for all of these cameras. So here I am in manual mode, and very nicely across the top now I have the three options that I want to talk about when you're setting an exposure. Your first is your shutter speed. That is the length of time that your shutter remains open when you take a picture. Right now it is set on 1/500th of a second, because last time I was taking pictures that's what I had it set on, and it remembers that and it keeps that there until you change it. Next I have Aperture. I'm just going to press Q and highlight that. Aperture is the opening, the size of the opening of the lens. It's expressed in a fraction. We're not going to go in detail to talk about that right now, but I'll just say that the smaller the number, the larger your opening. Lenses generally go from somewhere around, depending on how much you pay, 1.2, 1.4, all the way up to 22, 36 in that general range. The f1.4, f2, f2.8, those are very large openings, almost as wide as the lens glass itself. On the other end of the spectrum, the 22, f22, f36, those are tiny, tiny openings, just barely large enough for you to insert a pin through. That's your range. f5.6 is, kind of a medium open, again, expressed in fractions. And finally, your final option here is your ISO, the sensitivity of the sensor. Now I know that's not great, it's not very explanatory since I'm saying two words and trying to use both of those in the same definition, but the larger the number, the more sensitive that sensor is, that little piece of electronic equipment in your camera, to the light coming in. And it's a doubling factor. So at ISO 200, it is twice as sensitive as it is at ISO 100. At 400, it's twice as sensitive as it is as 200. I'm going to stop stuttering over my words there, and let's just go back to our main screen. So, let's press Live View now, and it's showing us, this is one of the reasons why I really think Live View is a great learning tool. I've said that in other videos. It's showing us the exposure we would get with these current settings. The shutter speed across the bottom, 500th of a second, our aperture of 5.0, and our ISO of 400. If we have pressed the shutter, you can see that the camera helpfully says, this is where I think your exposure is relative to a correct one. Correct one should be right there in the middle. What the camera thinks is a correct one. And again, remember, what the camera thinks is a correct one and what you want as a correct one are not always the same. Often they're very similar when you're just trying to take regular pictures, but they're not always the same. And I don't know if you noticed, but it did move a little bit based on the amount of light coming in through the skylight, whether or not it's brightening the scene or darkening the scene. So let's start to adjust our values of these settings to get a more correct exposure. First thing I'm going to do, the shutter speed is already selected. 1/500th of a second is pretty fast. I can go a lot slower than that before I run into any kind of negative effects. Do you know what those negative effects might be? Did anybody out there say motion blur? Now, that is correct. In this situation, the camera is sitting still. It's taking a picture of very still life. Nothing is moving. So you could go to shutter speeds very, very slow, multiple seconds, and there wouldn't necessarily be any negative impact on your image. And that would still give you a correct exposure. Let's do that just for fun. Let's go all the way down and take a picture 1 second long. I dialed, it says 1. Now my image, of course, is really overexposed. I'm going to go to 100. That makes the sensor as less sensitive as possible. And now, by holding down the AV button, I can dial the aperture way up. And notice 22 is the maximum for this lens. And the camera is now saying that I am overexposing slightly from what it believes to be a correct image, but this is actually very close to the image that I want to create here. And I'm going to go ahead and press the shutter button. It's going to take a picture. it took 1 second to take that picture. Let's go and put that on the screen for a second and get rid of all of the info. But you can see 1 second, f/22, ISO 100. And there's my image. And everything is fine. We should be able to zoom in on those flowers. And they are a little bit brighter than I would like, but everything is crisp and the image is just fine. We should also notice that the plant in the background, although dark, is in focus. We'll talk about that in just a second more. Now, that was the example of going there. But what if I was taking pictures, what if I was holding the camera, or if I was taking pictures of people moving? Well, those are two different things. So let's say first, if I was holding the camera and taking a picture of this flower, the one thing that you want to watch out for is shutter speed slow enough that you won't be able to hold the camera steady during them. If I picked up this camera and held it for 1 second, the image would be very, very blurry. The general rule of thumb is that your shutter speed should be a bit higher than your focal length. Right now I'm shooting with a 35mm lens. My shutter speed should always be above 35. The one time that you can break that rule and you're holding the camera is when you have a lens that has IS. Then you can go a little bit slower. But now let's say you're taking pictures of something that's moving, somebody that's moving, your kid, toddler, a dog running in the backyard. Now you're talking about shutter speeds that you want to be up around 125th of a second, 125th of a second. That's a pretty good, safe shutter speed for movement, unless we're talking about things that are moving very fast, or you could go a little slower if things are moving a little bit slower. In this case, you can see that my image is now very, very dark. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to roll my aperture, increase my aperture a good bit. I'll go to 2.8, pretty close. And now I can increase my ISO sensitivity to 400. And those flowers in the foreground are a little bit brighter than I want. I'm going to go back down to 200 for ISO. And now you can see that my exposure is identical, virtually identical, and you can see that little exposure meter at the bottom, virtually identical to the exposure I shot a minute ago that was a 1 second in f/22. But notice there are other differences now. Well, let me go ahead and take this picture. And press playback. Here it is. So exposure-wise, brightness, it is very, very similar. However, that plant in the background now is very soft and not in focus because I was shooting at such a smaller aperture. So, aperture increases and decreases the size of your lens opening, and that allows in various amounts of light depending on the size of the opening, but it also impacts your depth of field, how in focus things are. So, how I approach each situation is I say, well, what kind of aperture do I want for this? And I set it accordingly. Then I figure out the shutter speed I need and set that accordingly. And then if I need to adjust my ISO to get the shutter speed where I want it to be, then I'll do that. So that's usually my approach. Start with the aperture. And an easy way to do this is to shoot on AV mode. You set your aperture where you want. The camera will set the shutter speed, and you still have to set your ISO based on that. You could also go to auto ISO if you want. I'm not a big fan of auto ISO. This is again letting the camera have a little bit more control, and the more control you let the camera have, the more likely it is going to be to make a bad decision. It's kind of a bummer. We do have these really expensive, really nice cameras, but they're just not as smart as us after a little bit of learning and understanding how these different settings affect our image quality. So this was just a really quick, simple look at changing those values, talking a little bit about exposure. I'm going to come back with more videos that talk in depth. I'd like to have a series of kind of recipes, but really it all depends on what you see and the factors of fast enough to avoid motion blur, fast enough to avoid handshake, the aperture that you want for the scene, whether or not you want to kind of separate somebody from the background or it's a Vista and you want to get all of it in focus, then you're going to be shooting at those really high numbers, which is a really small opening. And then the ISO. And the one thing you want to watch out for your ISO with your kind of entry-level DSLRs is still around ISO 1600. Above that, we start to get quite noisy. And so if you can keep below that number, and the lower the better usually, then you're going to have a cleaner image. But if you need to go higher to keep that shutter speed from getting blurry, or getting long enough that your image is blurry, then you're going to want to do that, because a slightly noisy, non-blurry photo is better than a blurry photo that's not noisy, unless you're going for artsy blurry.
So what is one of the best things that I can give you advice-wise when it comes to photography of different cultures? Well, you might think it's the settings or the lens choice or, what type of ISO to use and all these technical terms. But really, the best thing that I find when it comes to photographing culture for photography is to not start by taking pictures. And you might be thinking, well, what do you mean don't start by taking pictures? Well, what I mean is, imagine if somebody showed up in your house and all of a sudden brought out this giant lens, never looked at you, never smiled, and just started taking your picture. Would that feel uncomfortable to you? Of course it would. And it feels the same to anybody around the world. There's a there's a thing about Americans around the world, and for those that are well traveled know that Americans are not always exactly the most respected when it comes to culture and how they do things. And so my advice on a photography trip is first and foremost this, and that is, if you want to get great photos of culture, don't start by taking a fit picture. Start by getting to know the people and the culture that you are surrounded with. Listen, when we talk about Mongolia here, I have to say that in my travels around the world, all 7 continents, more than once, 40 some plus countries, almost 50 countries, the people of Mongolia are some of the nicest, most beautiful, wonderful people I have ever met. And because their culture is unique, especially when you get up near Kazakhstan and you get to where the Eagle Hunters are and you start getting into folks that just don't see, a lot of city people, uh, you know, they can be treated like a commodity. If we show up and all we are doing now you should know that when we go and work with the Eagle Hunters, we do pay those hunters ourselves. We do that. But if we're treating them as a commodity, trust me, they could care less. What they want is to be treated as wonderful people that they are. They want to break bread with us. Well, in their case, they want to cook roast a lamb for us, but they want to have a great time with us. They want to get to know us. And if we take the time to get to know them and enjoy their culture, say hello, try and speak the language, have some fun, have some laughs, and then we start taking photos and we start showing them those photos. And here's Toby showing a drone going. All of a sudden you develop a relationship with these folks, and it's going to allow you to start taking better pictures of them because they're going to be relaxed, they're going to be ready for it, and they're going to be patient with you. So that's my first number one advice when it comes to taking photographs of any culture, is to just take your time, get to know people before you ever put up the camera and bring up the camera to your eye. That is going to be your best friend when it comes to getting great photos as you progress through the days and weeks on your tours. Another great way to break the ice with these folks, not only here in Mongolia, but anywhere in the world, is to go ahead and get, if you remember the old Polaroid cameras, you take a picture and zzz, it would spit out the photo. Well, nowadays you can get thermal printers. They make little cameras that print out little prints, or there's little printers that connect directly to your phone. And let me tell you, one of the awesome things that you can do is bring one of these with you and take photos. It has opened the doors to so many incredible encounters across the world for us. These are folks that typically don't have, pictures of themselves. because they don't go to the local Walgreens and get a print. So, you can take photos on your phone or with one of these little thermal printer cameras, print it out, give it to them instantaneously, and you never have to even speak the language. And the next thing you know, you've got smile after smile, and then you have parents wanting their kids to pose for you. You're invited into huts and places that it's just a matter of doing something really awesome for people, and it is one of the best things that you can do. Again, you do something like that, you build relationship, and then you can bring out your real cameras and start getting great images because you've broken the ice. So let's talk about a couple of the major festivals that happen in Mongolia. The first one is known as Nadam, and that one always takes place in July, and it has for centuries. And the thing about Nadam is that it takes place uh, not only in the main city of Ulaanbaatar, but in every village throughout the entire country. They celebrate the Nadam Festival. And it is made up of games such as uh, let's see, you've got horseback riding and racing, and these young kids race horses for miles and miles, and that is one of the biggest things that happens in all of the villages. You've also got, let's see, ankle bone. Where you you use these ankle bones to knock other ankle bones off this little it's like bowling with ankle bones with actual little bones. You've got archery is a big one, and wrestling is probably the biggest one. Wrestling can take one match can take an hour or more, and it's unlike any type of wrestling you have ever seen. And those folks, those wrestlers, are some of the most famous people in all of Mongolia. And but it takes place not only, like I said, in the main city, but in every village throughout the entire country. Now, if you want to talk about a photographic opportunity that is off the charts, without a doubt, Mongolia during Nadam is full of incredible costumes and pageantry. In the main city, all of the historical tribes of Mongolia, they come together in their dress from back in the historical days. They're all dressed in their traditional dress of their tribe from their region. And what's amazing is all these folks come, they gather in the main square in Ulaanbaatar, and they're there. They love to meet people and take photos. It's a huge, huge celebration. And then the festival opening day of Nadam happens in the stadium in Ulaanbaatar, and that is filled with about 20,000 people. Now, of course, during 2020, it did not take place. We were scheduled to be there, and now we will be there in 2021 for Nadam Festival. And it is wonderful. It's a picture of the Olympics, but just for the people of Mongolia, celebrating their traditions, celebrating who they are as a people. It's just an incredible time to photograph. And then when you get out into the other areas of the country during Nadam, they are all celebrating and doing Nadam as well, but they do it in their village. So you have wrestlers in the local village, and there might only be 50 people in that village, and they're all there to watch the wrestlers or all the children that are racing the horses. It's quite an amazing time, and it is just truly amazing to photograph all of this pageantry and everything that is taking place. And so that is one of the main times that people tend to go to Mongolia, is they like to go to Nadam, and then they can get out and see some other things as well. So that is probably the biggest tourist time to go, especially for folks that are not really into adventure. They can go there, they can stay in a nice hotel, they can see a lot of culture, and yet they can still, stay in their nice comfy bed in a hotel and not really go off the beaten path so much. And so that is a big, big tourist time in Mongolia. But I always say, if you're going to go there, you still want to get out. You still want to see Nadam. It's amazing. And then you want to get out to the local villages and see Nadam, and still spend some time with the great eagle hunters, which I will talk about next. So now let's talk about the incredible event known as the Eagle Hunter Festival. Now, up until not that many years ago, not very many people even really knew what the Eagle Festival was. Now, Ashapon, she was a 12-year-old girl, and if you watch the documentary, it will totally enlighten you on why, after that documentary, all of a sudden tourism jumped in Mongolia. The Eagle Festival became famous, and it went from a few hundred people coming to now usually a few thousand people coming. Now, the thing about the festival is it is all based around the eagle hunters. Now, when I say eagle hunters, do not be confused. These are not people that hunt eagles. What these are folks that get an eagle. You can learn about this in the documentary as well, but they take an eagle at a young chick, and they have to go climb a mountain to get a chick. It's got I think it's called a chicken eagle, an eaglet, sorry, an eaglet. And they have to go ahead and climb up, get this eaglet, take it out of its nest. It's got to be a female, and then they start working and training this eagle. Now, some of you may think that is sad, and just keep in mind that this is centuries and centuries and centuries old tradition. They train that eagle to hunt, and then what will happen will be that the eagles themselves will hunt and, say, get a fox. And when it takes the fox, the hunters do not actually eat the meat anymore. Most hunters now raise livestock, and so, but they do take the fur and they use the fur for clothing. The eagle, however, the reward is the food. And so they train these eagles, and then they come together, and this has happened for centuries, and they do a competition. And now there are not nearly as many eagle hunters left. There are about 300 hunters, but the tradition is being carried on, and Ashapon was the first female to compete in the festival, and now her sister has competed, and there are some other young girls that have been competed. We actually met this young girl here. Her name is I Murder. Yes, I said that right. I Murder, and we have met her and her family. She is a 9-year-old, 10-year-old girl, competed for the first time. She can barely hold the eagle. She's so tiny. And it was just quite awesome to be part of the festival. Now, whenever we go to Mongolia, regardless of the time of year, we have a special relationship that we have built with these folks. And so we are able to go outside of the festival. They will go ahead and they will work with us, and we get to do exclusive photography situations with these people. Not only that, we, as I said before, we get to, so to speak, break bread. We sit, we hang with them, we end up in their family gurs, and we eat with them, and we enjoy our time, and it makes for not only a wonderful time, but photographically, then it just becomes just off the charts. And so, but the festival itself, the Eagle Hunter, the best way for me to do it is just to say, go watch the documentary, then you'll understand what is going on at the festival. Regardless, when you go to Mongolia, if you go on your own, it is super important to try and find a guide that can get you aspects of some of the things I'm talking about here, to get you access to some of these families and these eagle hunters. Now, most people, they get to go, they might spend a half a day with a family, one hunter. We've been able to arrange, which is amazing, exclusive times where we will have 8 or 10 hunters with just us and our photography group for 2 days. And not only in just one location, but we go to different locations. We go up on a mountain, we go out to this incredible lake that you can see in this video. And so that is really incredible to get to do that. And so that is the difference between the Nadam Festival and the Eagle Festival. They are both equally amazing. They are different. Either way, whenever you go, you want to try and spend time with the people up in the Altai Mountains known as the Eagle Hunters. It is really, really worth doing. It is something that I highly, highly recommend, and I can't recommend enough. Yeah. Yeah? Okay. You stay here. Oh. You filming? Okay. Hey, pen members, this is David McKay, and I am out here in the Golden Eagle Festival in Mongolia with our team. And as you can see, I am on a horse with my buddy here, a hunter and a golden eagle. This is not what I had anticipated for this quick bite, but I was going to go ahead and give you a little quick tip on depth of field. A lot of times when we're photographing these guys and you have the eagle and then you have their face, you zoom in, and I found that you need to get that f-stop up, 11, f16. Anything under that, you'll find that one subject will be sharp and the other will be out of focus just a little bit, and I've had a few shots that haven't quite come out as much as I'd like. So anyway, that was my tip for today. Quick bite here from Mongolia and the Eagle Festival. Thanks so much for being a pen member. We hope to see you out here with us sometime soon. What I would like to do now is just take you through some of the images from Mongolia that are some of my favorites, and just explain to you how I photographed them, what I was thinking when I was doing it, and hopefully this will help you, no matter what level of photography you are at, kind of be thinking about how to get that next great shot. Now again, please keep in mind that a lot of the tutorials that I've done in the past are going to be available again, like I said, on the Travel and Adventure Show website with their Travel and Adventure TV. The reason I say that is because we've done so much tutorials and teaching and tips and tricks and content. You might be thinking, well, gosh, you didn't give me how to do shutter speed or how to do the best depth of field, things like that. And I just want to let you know that that is all available. We're just simply trying to get you as much as we can and specific to certain areas with the travel shows. So this was Asia and our love of Mongolia. So hopefully here now, as I talk about some of these images, and again, my technique, what I'm thinking, that will help you as you're going forward in your photography. This is one of my all-time favorite photographs that I have ever taken. I will never ever forget this moment, and I almost had tears in my eyes when it happened. But this was our first time in Mongolia, and this was in July of 2019, and our guide Oso had arranged, again, not only for just one eagle hunter to be photographed, but several. And after we got to know them and spent a day with them, we ended up with this great camaraderie with these guys, and it was just like we were friends. We couldn't speak the language, but we were friends. In fact, I've even been given gifts from these guys and given gifts to these guys, and I count them, like I said, as friends. I cannot wait to get back. What happened here was we had been doing a number of photographs during the day of them kind of posed. And we finally got to a point, we said, you know, we'd love to see these guys really just go for it. And so we had them ride out. You can see the lighting, and it had just rained, and now the sun had opened up, and it was just beautiful. And we had them ride out, and we wanted them to kind of ride back. Well, what we didn't expect to happen was for them to start racing each other. So their looks, their intensity, that is real. They started racing all the way back, just as if they were competing. And then they did it again. And then they did it again. And each time it was just as competitive, but friendly, and an amazing experience. So when I photographed this, you have to be thinking of fast shutter speed. I photographed this at 4,000th of 1 second. I wanted to make sure every little bit was sharp and stopped, that the action was completely stopped. Also, I may not go full manual when I'm photographing something like this, especially if the light is changing. A lot of times I will shoot on what's known as shutter priority, and that is where I'm using the, if you're a Canon user, that would be the T with a little V. Nikon, Sony, other cameras would be the S on your settings dial. And I set the shutter speed for what I want, and I allow the camera to adjust the other settings. In this case, I can allow the camera to adjust the aperture, and it will also adjust, if I set it to do so, auto ISO. So go ahead, if you're not familiar with how to do that, you can look that up in your camera manual or Google that for your particular camera and just learn how to use shutter priority as well. And it's a great thing to use in action if you're not quite sure what to do or if the light is changing dramatically and quickly. But again, this was shot at 1/4000th of a second. And I was focusing on what they call constant focus, where the focus changes. It's in Canon, it's called servo. It's called continuous focus in Nikon and Sony, and it continually focuses once you focus the camera on a point and will continue to follow, and also using continuous burst. So every time I push the button, it will burst so many shots at a time, and that helped me get this one shot where everything just was perfect, and I have a 70-inch image metal piece of this in my home. Now, I haven't talked about camels much today, but I want to show you this image of this camel. This was out at our first Gur camp, way out, I don't know, about 6 hours out of the main city of Ulaanbaatar. Now, this camel kind of looks like it's wild and just sitting there, and I got to be honest with you, that is not the case. They use camels not only for riding there, but they use them as luggage cart horses. So when you pull up and you have to get your luggage, they have a cart attached to the camels. They put the luggage on the cart, and then the camels go to your gur, your yurt, and then the people unload the luggage versus using mules or, you know, wheelbarrows. And so, you know, the terrain's rough, so they need to do something. But these camels were super cool, and I literally had finished dinner. I walked outside and I went, oh my gosh, look at this. And the sun was setting, and one of these camels, what they do is the camels are not tied up at night, they just stick around the area. One of these camels lined up pretty well, and this is one of those things, when I first walked out, I saw it. Where I was standing, it wasn't perfect. I had to move my feet. That's one of the biggest things I tell people. If it doesn't look exactly how you want it to look, it might just be moving your feet 5 or 6 feet one way or the other. And in this case, where I was standing, the camel didn't quite line up exactly how I wanted it over on the right in the thirds, and so I literally had to just move my feet a little bit and line it up where I took this photograph. Now, it is a silhouette, which means that I did not try and expose for the camel. I actually purposely exposed for the back areas and the sun as much as possible, and allowed that camel to go dark. It had such a beautiful rim light behind it, and you'll notice that it's cropped kind of long and thin, almost like a panoramic. There was a lot of empty area at the top and the bottom. There was really no need to keep all that. So in finishing the image, I cropped a bunch of the top and the bottom out, and I very importantly used the rule of thirds here. The sun is on that third and the camel just drops down in behind that, and it's just a beautiful silhouette. The thing about this was everybody was so tired from the day, and I told everybody, you got to get out here and see this, you got to get out here and see this. And a couple people came wandering out, and I'm like, if you guys don't hurry, you're going to miss it. And if you've ever watched a sunset, it looks like it can be there forever, and it literally goes away just like that. And so only a couple people actually went out with me and were able to get some great shots. This is an image of Genesbeck, and he is one of the most awesome guys. He is a champion eagle hunter, but not only that, you may have seen him in some of the documentaries that have been out, 60 Minutes. Recently, CNN featured him, and also he is known as the most eligible bachelor in all of Mongolia. He's 27 years old. He is an amazing, amazing guy, and he's my friend. And I say that we've never spoken a word to each other in our language because we can't understand each other, but he's just a great guy, and we've gotten to know him and his family, and he's just a wonderful soul. But again, you should take a look for him. Look at the CNN thing that they just did on him, and just Google some of the stuff on media, and Eagle Hunters, and you'll see him for sure. Anyway, he is somebody we get to photograph a lot, and we've got to spend time with him in his Gur family camp and hanging. And this image is a little bit different. Now you'll notice here I didn't do anything rule of thirds. I've actually shot this completely breaking the rules. I put him perfectly center, and I shot horizontal. No thirds, but it just was so striking to me with that background and the way the light was hitting him. This is all beautiful natural light. Also, it's hard to tell, but I'm extremely close to him. I'm using a wide angle lens. I can almost reach out and touch that horse. I'm probably only about 5 feet away, and that's changing the perspective, and it's making it just kind of a very interesting perspective versus standing back and zooming in. And so I got really, really close, use a wide angle lens, and captured this. And again, it's really all about light. That light, again, we had rain. You can see the dark clouds on the back, but that sun came out. And in this case here, Jennis Beck lifted his eagle. The eagle is flapping his wings up, and able to get this beautiful, beautiful portrait. It was great because when I went back a few months later, I was able to take him and some of the other hunters some of these images in prints and give them prints as a thank you. That was just a wonderful, wonderful thing because, again, they just don't have really any access to a lot of prints. It's funny, they all have a cell phone when they can get reception, but they do not have access to having a physical print. So in order to bless these guys as they blessed us, we had these printed and taken back to them, and it was just a wonderful, wonderful moment. So one of my favorite images from photographing in Mongolia for a number of reasons. Now, I had showed you this image before in the program not too long back, but I wanted to bring it back and talk about it. It is also one of my favorite images. Now, I'm showing you some of my favorite images. You have to understand, on a trip like this, I might take 4,000 photographs. It's important to understand, just like you, I don't have 4,000 great photographs. I have a handful of great photographs. I've got a lot of good ones, and I have some bad ones. One of the biggest mistakes people make is they think that every photograph has to be great. So they take, 1,000 photographs on a trip, and they complain, oh, I've only got 40 really great ones. And I'm like, that's awesome. I'm not really looking for 1,000, off the chart images. I know that out of 1,000 images, I might have one or two that I would consider what I would say gallery or art book worthy of my work. And so, there's a lot of really good images, and there's some bad images, and then there's some great images. This is one of those images that I feel is great. And pat on the back. I know it sounds kind of braggadocious there, but the reason I say that is we had just finished a meal with these folks, and this gentleman, I can't remember his name, and if I could, I probably couldn't pronounce it anyway. I can't wait to see him because I want to give him this in when I go back in July of 21. We're going to I'm going to have some prints made, but the light, this is in his actual family Gur, and the light was coming in through the doorway, and I just told all of our clients, I was like, hey guys, look at this beautiful light. And he went and got his eagle and brought it in, took the hood off, and you can see right even in the eagle's eyes there is a catch light. It's just like there's life. Now, one of the things that I had to do here, I've talked about depth of field before. If I had photographed this at what we call a shallow depth of field, a small number like 2.8 or 4, I might have gotten him in focus and the eagle would be slightly soft, or vice versa. So the challenge here was to get a high enough f-stop to get a lot of depth of field. But in doing so, you lose light because it closes down the eye of the aperture and you don't get as much light in. And so you get more depth but less light. So I had to actually creep up my sensitivity, my ISO, quite high on this. But it's totally acceptable, and I don't mind the noise. I'd much rather have everything sharp. So anyway, I think the depth of field on this, I think I was shooting at about f8, maybe 11 in order to get this shot, and I'm extremely close. Again, we're in very close quarters, but just beautiful, beautiful light coming in. And then I cropped it. I left a lot of room when I shot it, but I cropped it in extremely tight. I named this image Respect because it was such a beautiful mutual respect between the eagle and his owner. And it's also important to understand that these eagles at 5 to 7 years old, they release these eagles back into the wild. Most people don't know that. I didn't know that until my second time visiting Mongolia. The eagles have been trained to hunt. They are very capable of getting food on their own. And the reason they only take female eagles is that at about 5 to 7, those eagles want to mate. And so they're ready to go. And so they go through a ceremony where they release the eagles, and the eagles go, and the eagles actually leave home, leave that home and go find a mate, which is just a beautiful kind of circle of story of how this all works. Here's another image that you may have seen earlier in the program that I wanted to bring back. This is the little girl known as I Murder. Yes, I Murder. Uh, she's tiny, but she's almost 10 years old. And this was her first time competing in the Eagle Fest. And you got to realize that Ashapon made the way for young girls like this. And it's pretty awesome. Here she is, the eagle. So here's the amazing thing. There was 125 or so people or hunters that had actually competed. Out of those that made the final rounds, there was only about 20, and this young little girl was one of them. Her eagle was amazing. Now you see right here, the eagle's coming. That is a dead rabbit in her hand, and the eagle is just flown down off the mountain. They call to the eagle, and the eagle comes down. A lot of them don't fly down, or they might fly somewhere and land, and so that's part of the competition. And this eagle flew down and comes right to I Murder here and grabs that rabbit, but you can see I Murder's face. It's just one of like, oh my gosh, this is really happening. Think that eagle is almost as big as her. So this isn't exactly like, I don't know, something I'd put on a wall or something. There's a lot of things with it that I would use it for that, but from a moment and a standpoint of a little girl and her face, this is awesome, and it's something that I actually did give to her parents as well, and so that is a favorite of mine and a favorite memory of mine from this trip. And I would like to leave you with this image. This was taken in October of 2019. This is a couple days after the actual Eagle Festival had ended. We had a couple of these hunters that had a 3-day horseback journey back to their village, and they agreed to meet us out by this lake. So it was about a day and a half ride for them to get to this lake. So we had to basically say, we're going to meet you here at about this time. Does that work? And and it did. We were there about a half hour and nobody was there. That we were the only ones out there, and I mean we're out in the middle of nowhere, and we thought, well, maybe this isn't going to happen. I mean, we don't know where they are. Cell phones don't work, even if they had one at that point. And no joke, we look out on the horizon and here comes these two riders out in the distance coming our way. And so it was amazing. This lake is huge. The scenery is beautiful. You've seen that in some of the video footage. Crystal clear, reflection like glass, and we were able to have him ride towards us, go out on the land there, come around, ride towards us with his white horse with that eagle's wings spread going, and just again, magical time and magical experience, and one of my favorite images that I've been able to capture of an eagle hunter in Mongolia. Thanks again so much for being part of this travel and adventure show, for listening to me gab for an hour or so. Again, I hope you find some of the other talks that my wife and I did, and Toby, also our team member, did, and you enjoy those. Please feel free to reach out to me anytime with any questions. If you're going to any location that we may have been, whether you're going with us or not, is irrelevant. We'd love for you to reach out if I can help you, get you set up in any way, shape, or form in any of these areas. All right. Of course, for photography questions, email us as well. Check out our website. Thanks again so much, and we will see you at the Africa Travel and Adventure Show, where I will be doing a program on photographing a wildlife safari in Tanzania. Thanks, everybody.